Thank you very much. I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Marla Billinghurst, and I will be chairing the meeting this morning. My fellow panel members are Mr. Neil Harden and Mr. Ian Mann. Representing the assessment department is Mr. Justin Mikulik, and the administrative personnel for this morning is Ms. Fran Picoto. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 and 2 on our docket this morning. Ms. Picoto, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Justin Mikulik.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first matter we will be hearing on this morning's docket is number 1, file number 244481. I believe they are both the same property. Is that correct? One is just for 2023 and one is for 2025.
That's correct.
And on both of them, you will be appealing liability taxation, amount of assessed value, and classification of property.
I would assume the
Mr. Navarro. Oh.
Okay. I'll let him speak.
No, I don't believe so. I think the liability is taxable.
Okay, this is what was applied for, liability taxation, amount of assessed value, and classification.
No, we would just be appealing value.
Just the value? Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Assessor, we would just need the applicant to then state that he's requesting confirmation for those 2 points when the matters are opened.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Yep.
So we'll begin with number 1, file number 244481. And I guess, do you want Mr. Navarro to state that now, or do you want the assessor to put in his information first?
I think it's fine when it's the applicant's turn to present his evidence.
Sure, no problem. So, Mr. Mikulik, please proceed when you are ready.
So we have roll number 1209-780-9485. property. It's owned by Canada Lands Corporation, assessed value 11,328,000. And we have vacant land here. We have as vacant residential 2 high density with a RR5 zoning and a land area of 2,229,056 square feet, which is around 51 acres or so. There was a sale in 2022, but we won't touch on that for this specific assessment year. And you could see on page 2, we have the aerial photo of the subject of what's being spoken about today. So the areas highlighted with the purple outline would be the Canada Lands portion of this property of what is owned. And if we go to page 3, so just a description and a rundown here of how everything all came about. So Canada Lands is a self-financing federal crown corporation specializing in real estate development and attractions management. Just gives you a little couple sentences about who they are here with regards to the land development sector. Now, some more information about this. So this used to be known as the Cap Young Barracks, located on Kenniston. I think everybody sort of knows where that location is, if you're from the city, but it's on the west side of Kenniston between, say, Grant and Taylor. Used to be an old military base. Now in 2021, Treaty One Nations, they named the property Nawe Odina, and the redevelopment of it. So there's a proposal for a full redevelopment of making it kind of a, I guess they would call an urban indigenous economic zone, where there's going to be various multifamily, commercial development, recreational facilities, green space, etc. That's going to be developed on the property. Now, there was a settlement in 2019, as you could see, where the agreement outlines that 32% was to be allocated to Canada Lands, which is what we're speaking about, and the remaining 68% for the establishment of the urban reserve held in common by Treaty One. And so if you want to look forward here on page 4, it just gives a description of what the land use framework is. So you could see here in the table what they planned. So the Canada Land secondary plan area would be, you could see how it's allocated with mixed use village, commercial mixed use, and it gives you the breakdown of how many acres they're sort of looking at. So the predominant usage of it for them would be through medium density residential and lower density residential. And then you could see the community spaces takes up about 5.7 acres, right of ways 8.47 acres, storm management or stormwater management facilities, some mixed use village, you could see 4.87 acres. So it's really more geared to the kind of the mixed use with the residential and some commercial element to it. Now, you could see further that there's a couple paragraphs here at the bottom. So based on the proposed height and density provisions, full completion, the plan area could accommodate 1,200 and 1,500 residential units in between 150,000 and 135,000 square feet of commercial space. And then so overall, the whole lands would accommodate 2,300 to 3,000 residential units. And so you could see it's really a very large project and large development that they see taking place. Schedule 1 on page 5, I just gave another outline here of the areas that we're speaking about around the dotted red line. So you could see where the various types of uses come in. So the purple being mixed use village with the legend there on the right, yellow being lower density residential, and the orange being the medium density residential. And so you could see where that would end up fitting in with the development of the urban reserve. Now, if we go to page 6, I've provided some land comparables here just to show where our valuation fits in relative to other types of vacant land properties. Now, this is 51 acres. It's nearly next to impossible to find that size of land in terms of being that close to inner city. But we do see that based on the comparables 1, 2, 3, and 4, you could see that comparables 1, 2, 3, they are zoned residential mixed use and multifamily already. So that is reflective in the prices that were paid. So there was no undertaking of a zoning change that they had to undergo to get the permission to build and develop on the land, but they didn't have servicing either in some of those sales. And so you could see that those ones on comp 1, 2, and 3 range a lot higher price per acre. Now, comp 4 is one that was zoned rural residential 5 with no sanitary sewer. I would say, not as good of a location as where this one is. I would think that the subject relative to all the comps today would probably have a superior location, just being where it's located in the city. Now, comp 4 was 466, just under $467,000 per acre. We're at 221,370 per acre on the subject. So this was also zoned rural residential 5 for comp 4. Comp 5 and 6, they were also zoned agricultural. So those agricultural and rural residential 5 have a lot of similar type of restrictions, I guess, that get placed on them in terms of what you can build. You can't really build a lot of the high density type stuff yet until that gets changed over. But you could see that the sizes of 8 acres of agricultural zone land on 2700 King Edward and 80 Payworks Way. You could see the price per acre for the one on King Edward is 195, 116. The Payworks Way is 825, 419 per acre. So you could see the variability of it, that even though they were zoned not for development of multifamily yet, that they still did sell in the range of where the subject price is listed at. And again, the subject is superior location. It's very close proximity to the services too that it's going to need. They won't have to go a large distance for the service hookups. So it does present those positives as well relative to say comps 4, 5, and 6. Now, I've had shown some pictures here. So comp 1 was located on Ballantrae Drive, which is a newer development located next to rapid transit. So it is a pretty good location wise for multifamily. I mean, I guess the only detractor would be it is right next to industrial, but I mean, there is demand for multifamily in the city, so we don't really tend to see that it being next to industrial is maybe a detractor in terms of the overall development of that land. And then, so that sale price, $28.13 per square foot. This one's at $5.08, but those are also, were already zoned like the RMU, the RMFM. Comp 2, you could see that was on Sage Creek. So again, new development area, already zoned for multifamily building. Comp 3, located back again on Ballantrae Drive, close to the Rapid Transit Way. you could, and that would have been already zoned for multifamily development. Now, comp 4 was a rural residential 5 zoning. It was located on Pipeline Road in the northwest quadrant of the city. And so that had sold for $10.72 per square foot, zoned RR5 with no sanitary sewer at the time of the sale. And you could see that based on the photograph, it's outlined for plotted for residential development. Now, comp 5 is located in that northwest quadrant of the city as well. That would be by the King Edward Inkster Garden new development. So if you were to go, say, west down Inkster towards King Edward, you would end up running into that area. It's kind of close to some industrial development, and it's close to that newer development that's taking place there. And that was a agricultural zoning, 8.62 acres, no sewer, no water. And that one was the lowest price per acre at 195, 116, or $4.48 per square foot. Comp number 6, we have in South Point, so that would be closer to the subject in that new development, though, out by Bridgewater, South Point area. And that was zoned agricultural as well, 8 acres. And that sold for $825,000 an acre, or $18.95 per square foot. So where the subject's coming in at $5.08, or $5.08 per square foot, 221, 370 an acre. Given that it is superior in location to these comparables, we feel that it's still reflective on the low end of value, and so we don't see where we would need to adjust it further, especially that we did provide some comparables that were zoned agricultural, and we do have rural residential 5 as well that does sell at that price point. So yeah, I think we're okay on the valuation here, and that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And Madam Chair, I will also have some rebuttal on the assessor's information. I think you've already received that, so you can decide when I can present that.
I will be distributing that right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll start with my questions relating directly to the assessor's evidence. Mr. Mikola, you would agree that the site and the comparables that you have are slightly different, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the biggest difference, of course, in the comparisons that you've provided is size, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if we were to value these against those comparisons, you would agree that there would be some requirement for some type of adjustment based on the size alone, correct?
Yeah, you could adjust for size, although I think it is already on the lower end, so I don't know why we would be going lower.
Can you just confirm what is on the lower end?
Well, we're at $5.08 per square foot. These comps are, $10.72, $4.48, $18.95 for the ones that have similar type of zoning characteristics. So I don't know why we would be going more at this point.
Okay. And I note that one of your smallest lots is 1.64 acres. Does that compare well to 51 acres?
No, it would not in terms of the size, but it does compare with the type of development that wants to take place here
Okay.
with this type of property.
In your evidence, you've actually outlined what the vision is for this subject. I believe you've located it on page 4 and 5 of your presentation. I don't know if you had time to do the math on it, but would you agree that roughly 30% of the space on the Canada Lands portion are areas that will not achieve any type of economic benefit, meaning that they are community spaces, right-of-ways, or stormwater? Is that correct?
There is gonna be that type, but I didn't do an exact breakdown of what that's gonna be, but I did use, I mean, if you look at the table, you can see the amount of, on page 4, the amount of acreage that's going to be donated to medium density and lower density residential. So
Mhm.
it is still 30% of 52 acres is, or sorry, 30, close to 30 acres out of the 52 is between medium density, lower density, and then another almost 5 acres of mixed use with commercial mixed use. So that's about 35 acres out of the 52 are gonna
Okay.
be, like, I think that's pretty sufficient. I think it's predominantly gonna be that type of land, wouldn't you agree?
I would say that
When you look at the
I
breakdowns?
mean, I'll comment on my own when I get to those sections. But regarding the rest of your presentation, your assessment is 11,328,000, correct?
Yeah.
That is the sale value, correct?
Well, I mean, if we want to bring that up, it post reference, but yeah, it did sell for that. I mean, we're gonna.
Is it a coincidence that the assessment and the sale price are the same?
I just review the value with comparables to see if it needs an adjustment. So, I mean,
Okay.
I'm not gonna speak for how that would have potentially got reviewed in our department. So I don't
Those are my questions, Madam Chair, and there is also uh, the rebuttal that I've provided.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Harden, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yeah, I guess your comparables are located in areas that there's going to be imminent development on them. Is that not correct?
Yeah, there is some that would have imminent development.
Like the one on Pipeline itself, I think it already is developed actually.
Yeah, it
Uh,
might be at this point.
okay, and do we know how far off the development is on the Canada Lands?
I think they've just got approval for their secondary plan through the city, and then so either this year or next year, they're gonna be taking action in terms of analyzing the site. Site specifically like soil, etc., on how they can proceed with that development.
Okay. Uh, is there any, I guess it might be a little premature, any hint of any environmental concerns on these lands?
I wouldn't
Given,
be, yeah, I wouldn't be able to comment regarding that at this point.
okay, thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mann, do you have any questions for the assessor?
I do, please. With respect to the comparables that you have, specifically the comparable 4, 5, and 6, the zoning at the time of sale was comparable or similar to the subject property. Did those comparables have a plan in place with respect to either development or a public plan that had been revealed to either the city or to surrounding residents?
I don't know if that was revealed to them. I mean, I know that like the previous question from Mr. Harnden was about were those properties developed. My guess is they were bought and started development fairly within maybe a year or so after the sale. So I
Okay.
don't know specifically though what they would have released to residents or surrounding them about it.
Okay, the report of Canada Lands that is at page 3, or portions of it are at page 3 in your materials. The redevelopment of Naui Udina took a significant step forward, et cetera, in 2019. But in March 2021, it indicates immediately before the reference date, coincidentally enough, 2 years of joint planning. Treaty One First Nations and Canada Lands released their master plan. That was done in conjunction with city planner or city officials as well, was it not?
Yeah, like I don't have the breakdown of who they spoke to and those type of timelines. I mean, this is a huge project that there's a massive vision for the city of Winnipeg, but it did around that time. That's when they would have acted with conjunction of the city of Winnipeg in terms of showing them what they wanted to do.
Right, and you're not, you're not aware of any similar, call it joint partnership for want of a better word, with the developers in comps 4, 5, and 6?
Not to this extent. I mean, this is a pretty significant project.
Okay, I think that's you talked about services. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. My questions have been asked and answered. So we can move on to Mr. Navarro's presentation.
Oh, did you want me to present or do my rebuttal first?
Well, your rebuttal would go after your presentation.
Okay. So we are looking at page 1, and that is the front page, giving us some of the information. This is file number 244481 and roll number 12097809485. On page 2, you can find summary information. So the owner is Canada Lands Company CLC Limited. This is vacant land. We have it at 51.45 acres. I believe you can actually find that in the assessor's information too. So there's just a slight discrepancy on size. Zoning in place is RR5. That's Rural Residential 5. There's no civic address. There is no water service, no sewer service. Western boundary, eastern boundary, north boundary, and south boundary. There is no access or egress at this point. Roadway infrastructure, none. Electrical service, none. Topography is normal. The current assessment is $11,328,000. That is roughly $220,175 per acre. And the assessment that we are recommending is $6,431,000 or $125,000 per acre. On page 3, you can see that the intended use of the report is specifically for the purpose of this appeal. So we do not refer this document to any other or use it for any other reason other than this appeal. And the intended user, of course, is the Board of Revision and the owner and the assessment department. In terms of scope of work, we have reviewed quite a bit of zoning and planning information. As well, we have interviewed the owner. We have looked at all of these things that are listed there. We have not conducted any type of environmental assessment, so we are not seeing that anything environmental was looked at. On page 5, you can see the hypothetical condition. And again, this is the present physical asset as of the reference date. That is for the year 2023. I won't get into extraordinary assumptions and limited conditions. On page 6, you can see an overhead map of it. We don't have the exact parcel lines. Unfortunately, we don't have that type of software that the city has access to. But here we do have it, and this is from a publicly accessible site. So there are 3 portions to this site. Again, this site is 51.45 acres. And just a brief description of the land on page 8. I believe the assessor actually noted some of this information. This was the former Capillon Barracks, home to the Princess Patricia's Light Infantry since World War II. Decommissioned in 2004. In 2007, the Department of National Defense received approval from the government to sell the barracks. At that time, that kind of set off a series of legal challenges at the federal court level, and that was between Treaty 1 First Nations and the Government of Canada. So now we Odna, that is the former Capillon Barracks development, consists of two tracts of land with 2 different ownership groups. As I didn't get into it, but the courts obviously ruled that Treaty 1 First Nations would retain ownership of a certain portion of those lands, and roughly 68%, and the remainder to Canada Lands Corporation. Treaty 1 First Nations, again, 108.26 acres, and Canada Lands 51.45 acres. So on the next page, you can see a map detailing this. Again, 108.26 acres, or roughly 68%, go to Treaty 1 First Nations, and the remainder to Canada Lands is 51.45 acres, or roughly 32%. You'll also note that the portions that are fronting Kenaston, which are the more valuable portions that have the more varied uses, are the ones that were retained by Treaty 1 First Nations. On the topic of highest and best use. So generally there are 4 tests of highest and best use. And I think everybody has probably heard this from me at one point or another. But I'll go over this because this is one occasion where this actually does make sense, or we have to discuss the issues of highest and best use. So it must be a legal use permitted under local administrative regulations, such as zoning. The use must be probable rather than unlikely or highly speculative. The use must be complementary rather than competitive, and there must be demand for such use. And the use must be the most profitable for the entire property and generate the highest net return over a reasonable amount of time. The highest and best use for the subject is land, is a land holding awaiting rezoning. You can see the former barracks there as they existed prior to the buildings being knocked down on page 10. And so we'll get into the bulk of the brief on highest and best use. So comprises of 160 acres in southwest Winnipeg. As I've noted before, 68% of the site is Treaty 1 First Nations, and about 51.45 is Canada Lands Corporation. Current zoning is RR5. Now, RR5 under the City of Winnipeg zoning bylaw. This is low density, and it's been applied to some federal lands. It's often applied to lands that are transitioning. And as detailed below, RR5 zoning imposes strict limits on land use and development intensity, which directly affects the land's marketability and assessed value. So what are the restrictions and limitations? For the purpose of this report, RR5 zoning district is intended to preserve land for large lot residential, rural residential, along with limited agricultural uses. In other words, it permits a very low density use of the land. The City of Winnipeg's zoning bylaw provides acreage for acre-style housing and minor agricultural activities. Permitted uses are generally just single-family dwellings and some agricultural uses such as small crop cultivation, grazing of livestock, and things like beekeeping. So you are limited in what you can do with this type of zoning. RR5 does not permit any dense urban development. Multifamily housing, commercial, all those are not allowed under RR5 zoning. Even a subdivision into suburban sized lots is not allowed. So again, keep in mind that this is still RR5 zoning. The RR5 zone standards, requirements for private well and septic, if not serviced, mean land is effectively frozen in a semi-rural state. So obviously here in this case, we're not going to break this up into 5 10-acre rural holdings. That wouldn't make any sense. But what this is trying to convey is that this type of zoning still restricts you from doing a considerable amount of planning while it is still RR5. So these zoning restrictions negatively impact the land's marketability and value in the near term. Under RR5, the property's legal permissible use is essentially rural estate lots or agricultural open space use. This is a narrow market compared to the much broader pools of developers and end users who could be interested in land if it were zoned mixed-use urban development. As a result, the land's current value is based on its constrained use and perhaps some speculative future potential. Now, the secondary plan versus the current zoning. So we just want to explain what the secondary plan is. So I think a lot of people are under the impression that the secondary plan is a legal document. It's not. Secondary plan is a vision for the area. Now, there is a requirement to have a secondary plan in there, but really what changes the marketability and the use of this property is the final change in zoning. It is not the secondary plan. Now, we hope and we believe that the secondary plan will be followed. But again, we have to distinguish between what is legally permissible and what is not. And at this point, the only thing that is legally permissible are those uses defined under RR5 zoning, regardless of what the secondary plan is stating at this point. On page 11 or 13, you can see the secondary plan and its vision. As I mentioned, there is quite a amount of space that will not achieve any type of economic benefit. It's, I believe it was roughly 30% of the site. On top of that, in terms of the more intense uses that derive, the highest amount of value, for example, commercial uses are restricted to about 1.94% of the area. So most of the benefit is coming from mixed-use village, lower density, and medium density residential. And again, 30% of the entire site owned by Canada Lands Corporation is for areas that will not achieve any type of economic benefit. So the legal status of the plan. It's crucial to note that the secondary plan is a policy and vision document, not a regulatory rezoning by itself. Okay. RR5, the land use vision must be translated into new zoning districts or special planned development overlay in order to be implemented. And neither of those have happened. Plan versus zoning conflict. The secondary plan's vision in many ways is incompatible with the current RR5 zoning. And so again, legally permissible use of the property at present is still RR5. And you can see that again on page 14 at the lower section in the zoning as the governing development rights, legal permissibility. So in terms of what is legally permissible, we are still restricted by RR5 zoning. What is the impact of that on highest and best use? Well, you can see that on page 15. RR5 zoning limitations directly depress the site's current utility and by extension its market value. Under RR5, the land cannot generate significant income or accommodate large-scale development. And for example, an investor cannot build 1,500 homes or 135,000 feet of commercial space on the Canada Lands parcel today. Consequently, a rational buyer in the market today would pay a price reflecting the current allowable uses, which are very limited, combined with a discounted expectation of future development potential. And is there any evidence of this? Well, there are some situations that I've outlined here. So many large development sites in Winnipeg go through a similar phase where they are held in an agriculture or rural residential zoning prior to development. During this phase, their assessed value tends to be much lower than after they are rezoned in service. City's practice for new suburban precincts is instructive. Areas defined for future growth, Waverly West precincts or the Parker lands, remain zoned agricultural or RR until development approvals, and their assessments reflected raw land values. In the case of Naui Odina, we have a striking illustration from an economic perspective. Analysts have estimated that if the full 64-acre Capion Naui Odina lands were built out as a high-end residential and retail hub, the aggregate assessed value could reach $300 million, generating roughly $8 million in annual property taxes. Currently, however, in their undeveloped RR state, their value is only a small fraction of that projection. In fact, Treaty 1's agreement with the city contemplates a phased approach to the service in lieu of taxes, precisely because the First Nations will not be earning revenue from the land until it is developed. It would be unreasonable for the assessment authority to assess the Canada Lands portion today as if it were already fully serviced. Such a valuation would ignore the very real zoning and servicing hurdles that still exist. Highest and best use analysis on page 16. The classic 4 tests are legal permissibility, physically possible, financially feasible, and maximally productive. Under current conditions, any use consistent with the secondary plan fails the first test. It is not legally permissible yet. The uses that are legally permissive, large lot residential, are physically possible and would be financially feasible on a modest scale, but they are certainly not maximally productive for this prime location. They produce far less land value than the envisioned mixed-use development would. However, because of the zoning, the maximally productive use today is constrained. From a property tax perspective, Manitoba's assessors are tasked with valuing the property at market value as of the reference date April 1, 2021 for the 2023 roll. Under its current condition, given that as of early 2023, Naui Odina lands were still zoned RR5, no new zoning bylaws had been passed. The legally permissible highest and best use at that time remained rural residential. RR5 zone parcel and market evidence. We put in a few examples here of where this has occurred. So 180 Creek Bend Road in the St. Vital area. This was a 6.44 acre parcel in South Winnipeg, like the Capion Barracks, was earmarked for future residential development, but remained zone RR5, being adjacent to a developing neighborhood, which was Precinct K. It had municipal services at the boundary, but still required rezoning in order to achieve the higher residential densities. In 2018, the RF5 parcel was put on the market for approximately $3.7 million at $13 per square foot. That price reflected its then current status, essentially a raw land with future potential. If that same land were fully approved for condo or subdivision developments, value would be significantly higher. And then we give another example. This example shows how R5 lands trade at a discounted rate as compared to properties that have been rezoned. And more importantly, at the very bottom of that paragraph, we also state that keep in mind that that was a 6.44 acre parcel. The size matters. Size matters considerably, especially when you're comparing, in this case, 6.44 acres to 51.45 acres. But even from the assessor's comparisons, where we're comparing parcels as small as an acre and a half to 51.45 acres. The comparisons are almost meaningless, actually. You need to have something that is somewhat relative to the subject in order to get some type of proper comparison. Damon Farm Road, this is another case of a rural residential enclave with city limits, saw developers seeking to rezone or vary RR5 zoning. And again, the same thing happens. There is a discounted rate because that RR5 zoning remains in place. Obviously, if that were different, those lots would achieve a much higher value. We'll skip the next portion and go to the overlays, planning overlays. So the Naui Odina secondary plan provides maps delineating land use areas, road layouts, open spaces, that type of thing. Secondary plan use map aligns with the concept renderings, for instance, and other zones of commercial use along major frontages, medium density and lower density residential. It also shows the boundary between the Canada Lands portion and the Treaty 1 portion. Generally, the Treaty 1 land comprises of northern and central parts of the site, and while the subject is those sections that are next to the Tuxedo neighborhood. So I'm just going to flip to the conclusion here. And R5 obviously imposes significant development restraints that, in our opinion, should be recognized. It obviously affects the issue of highest and best use. It does not allow the legally permissible use of this site for anything other than RR5. So until that changes, nothing can happen with this site. And its value should be reflective of that. The zoning reality directly impacts the highest and best use for appraisal and reassessment. The property's immediate highest and best use is as land held for future development under RR5 constraints rather than the fully realized development depicted in the planning document. And again, what we must keep in mind is that that planning document, the secondary plan, is a visionary document. It's not a legal document. That is our conclusion on highest and best use. On page 20, the analysis, again, this is the 2023 assessment based on the April 1, 2021 reference date. We are using the direct comparison approach. We just will actually get into some other issues. Land drainage is a significant issue with this site. So this area, the former Capion Barracks, is part of the Winnipeg Doncaster Combined Sewer District. And it utilizes a combined sewer system that collects both stormwater and sanitary sewage. The system includes a combined sewer outfall gate chamber discharging into the Assiniboine River at the northern end of Doncaster Street. And during dry weather, now the wastewater is diverted southbound to a pipe into the combined sewer system of the Ash District, eventually reaching the north end sewage treatment plant. However, during wet weather events, excess flow can overtop the primary weir and discharge directly into the Assiniboine River via Doncaster combined sewer outfall. Sluice and flap gates are installed to prevent river backflow into the combined sewer system during high river levels. So the challenges of this area are how to achieve the necessary flows and that this type of development will require. So at the moment, the plan for this entire area basically would overwhelm the current services in place. So essentially they have to be upgraded. And that's not something that will come cheap. So that's also something that has not been determined at this point. So there are combined, as you can see there in section 3, redevelopment challenges related to land drainage, combined sewer overflow risk. The existing sewer system poses a risk of CSOs. So that is combined sewer overflow, where untreated sewage and storm water can be discharged into the Assiniboine River during heavy rainfall events. So the limitations are that the current sewer infrastructure lacks the flood pump station or lift station, limiting its capacity to handle increased loads from new developments. Additionally, the existing combined sewers may not have sufficient capacity to accommodate the projected increase in wastewater and stormwater from the planned mixed-use community. There is a need for sewer separation. So to mitigate the combined sewer overflow risks and accommodate new development, the City of Winnipeg CSO Master Plan recommends that a complete sewer separation in the Doncaster district. This would involve installing new land drainage sewers and converting existing combined sewers to separate sanitary sewers. Such separation would allow stormwater to be discharged directly into the Assiniboine River during high rainfall events, while sanitary sewers would be conveyed to treatment facilities. So there are some available solutions. You can see them. I'm not going to go over these because you can go over them, or you may have gone over them yourselves. But all of these solutions are costly. And the one that provides the best probably solution would be integration with Route 90 improvements. So many of you may know that Route 90 is slated to have an expansion, and who knows when that will happen. That would be the best case scenario for this entire development, to be able to tie into those improvements, and that would allow sufficient flow outside of this future development. However, that's based solely on the timelines of the City of Winnipeg and whether they want to proceed with the Route 90 expansion. On page 24, you can see some pictures of the water and waste sewer systems. I won't go over zoning because I think we've touched upon zoning already. Again, what I can say about zoning is that it is the current zoning, which is R5, highly restricts this property from being developed into anything other than large rural residential. And as in terms of planning, there are, again, the secondary plan we've gone over. This is part of our Winnipeg. Additional risks from the property. There is a bill, additional risks from Bill 37 change to the Planning Act. This came in 2021. The Planning Act was amended under Bill 37 by the provincial government. The amendments include a change that gives the Manitoba Municipal Board jurisdiction to hear appeals to development decisions such as zoning applications. Under the new changes, 25 voters, or 50% of the property owners within 100 meters of the development, can force an appeal hearing before the Manitoba Municipal Board. Again, when we're talking about, what we think are the huge differences between something like Waverly West, where we're talking about former farmlands where you have no opposition to anything. Farmlands are easy to develop. You just wait for the development to reach the area and away you go. There's nothing really preventing those areas from rapidly going through that development process. This is slightly different because it is within established neighborhoods and it is large scale. And this change to the act itself creates a situation where you only need about 25 voters to say, not in my neighborhood. And we all have probably heard about this concept of NIMBYism. It unfortunately, there is a stigma also attached to the idea of urban reserves. And while we think that, the planning process and the consultation process has been more than adequate to explain to the neighborhood surrounding these areas that, there will be a vision for this area that all sides can agree to. This really only needs 25 people or so to oppose it before it goes to a hearing. So that is not something that most developments have to go through. Remember, we must keep in mind that we are attached. There's two sides to this. There is the First Nations and there is the Canada Lands portion. And they have to proceed in conjunction with each other. Three recent developments in the media, most recently, 425 Roblin Boulevard. Again, simple 55 plus 199 unit apartment development approved by City Council. The Manitoba Municipal Board rejected the proposal based on the size and scale of the proposed development. In this case, a petition signed by 2,000 citizens was submitted opposing to the council's decision. The appeal process in this case ended the development and all investment to that point. 490 Shaftesbury Boulevard. Again, 3 buildings, total of 58 units. 102 signatures opposed the zoning variance approved by City Council. Local area residents opposed the proposed development because it did not conform to the area, which is made up mainly of single family dwellings. This is 490 Shaftesbury. This is, again, in that Tuxedo area. And then there's the famous LeMay Forest, which I'm sure most of you have seen on the news at one point or another. I'm not going to get into that one because I think most of you have heard about that one. So there are some planning risks to this alone, just based on the ability of citizens to form opposition to it, coupled with the idea that some have about urban reserves. Most types of similar developments don't have that type of opposition. I will note one final fact about the whole the urban reserve is that the Treaty 1 First Nations are actually working in conjunction with Canada Lands and the City of Winnipeg in terms of the planning process and the vision for this area. The Treaty 1s are not subject to zoning like Canada Lands are. So understand that they're not really subject to some of the harm that Canada Lands could see if there was some opposition to what they are planning to build in these areas. So there's a complicated look at sales, which I've provided an extra sheet for you all. And it came as an attachment with the original submission. And essentially it was just an attempt to try and blow up the sales, so it's a little bit more legible. However, I mean, I think if you turn the document around, it's a PDF, and blow it up a bit, you can probably see a lot of the sales on this chart. And that would be the chart on page 31. So there is a lack of, and I'm reading from page 32 now, there is a lack of RR5 zone lands that compare well to our subject both in size and location. However, agricultural land is comparable in our opinion because it shares some of the same restrictions as RR5 zoning. These lands are often at the cusp of development zones, making them an ideal comparison. Agricultural land closer to large-scale developments achieve higher sale prices than agricultural land further away from development zones. This is consistent with RR5 zone lands as well. Our land sample includes 26 comparisons with varying zoning, location, and proximity to large-scale development. On the lower end, agricultural parcels below $20,000 per acre include indices 11, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 22. The development horizon for these parcels is between 5 and 15 years. Realistically, probably closer to 15 years rather than 5 years, which explains why they are valued so low. There are 2 RR5 comparisons in this grouping that are similar in size to our subject, but their development horizon is more than 10 years, in our opinion. Land in New St. Boniface, New St. Vital have a development horizon between 5 and 10 years, where a sector plan process is required before a secondary plan. Now, the next page speaks about another set of indices, which you will find on the next page after this. You'll see a bunch of comparisons on page 34. So page 33 refers to page 34. The next set of comparisons includes indices 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 25. This is the largest grouping of land comparisons with significantly lower development horizons. Development horizons for these sales comparisons are likely 5 to 10 years. Many of the lands in this sample would be closer to development or at the cusp. These parcels range between $20,000 and $63,000 per acre. Development in West Kildonan is following natural path northward. We believe these areas will likely be the subject of, in terms of dense. We believe land in these areas will be like the subject in terms of land, in terms of their density and use, with lands closest to Phillip Street achieving the highest density and varied uses. And those are them on page 34. Now on page 35, we have the last set of comparables. And the final grouping includes 5, 6, 7, and 8. You can see them there. Lands range between 119,628 and 365,286 per acre. Please note that indices 5 and 6 sold together and are contiguous, making the sale price actually 68,364. These land sales comparisons are closer to the development and could develop immediately, and some have already. The lack of development impediments where opposition to proposed development is unlikely makes these parcels valuable. Also, services for these areas are at the cusp, where simple extensions into these newer areas require very few considerations, unlike the land drainage and wastewater issues of the subject parcel. We also note that even within a few structural and regulatory, very few structural and regulatory impediments, unforeseen opposition to development is possible even in these lands. The case of Lemay Forest lands is noteworthy. Given the number of issues noted, I am on page 36 now in this review paper. Again, what issues are there? Well, uncertainty surrounding land drainage and wastewater infrastructure. RR5 zoning restrictions that limit potential use without an overarching secondary plan. No secondary plan approval. And again, this is 2023, April 1, 2021 reference date. Today, there is a secondary plan, or that visionary document is in place. Changes to the Planning Act. Again, those I outlined previously on how much little opposition it takes to actually railroad one of these development proposals. Opposition to future rezoning of these lands when secondary plan approved, and misinformation on urban reserves. The market value of the subject would be impeded by various issues surrounding land drainage and wastewater costs, current zoning restrictions under RR5 zoning, the uncertainty of the planning process, social and cultural issues that could affect future zoning applications. All of these play a role in impeding the development process for this site. The market value between the upper end of the second grouping, lower end of third grouping of sales is where our subjects should be valued. So between 120,000 and on the low end and 365,000 on the high end. We note that the low end index was part of an approved precinct plan shortly after the sale took place. This property located in the northwest side of the city where development is quickly moving northward from Garden City. This location is very comparable in our opinion, but the subject is still better situated. Index 7 is in Waverly West B. This site, in our opinion, would be at the high end of the market for several reasons. There are no impediments to development at this former farmland site. It is a well-established region that follows a larger development plan for the Waverly West B plan. All the factors hindering the subject do not exist here, so a potential purchaser will pay more in this area. Please also note that Waverly West, for example, the structure plan has been in place since about 2006. So Waverly West has had a long time to evolve since that original structure plan was put in place. Now we're talking about individual plans within the Waverly West original vision. The most recent one is Waverly West B. So based on these considerations, we believe that a rate of 125,000 or 287 per square foot is fair. That is 6,431,250 or 6,431,000. In the appendix, again, these are, again, I tried to blow these sales up so it would look a little bit easier for you to look at, but so the first two pages are just that. Page 40 would be the first two sales, which are the LeMay lands. That's index 5 and 6. Index 7 would be within the Waverly West B plan. And index 8 would be within the precinct G plan. And that is those lands that are abutting McPhillips Street and moving forward or moving northward from Garden City. And lastly, we look at the implementation of the plan and phasing. You can see here in the final pages of this, it kind of outlines some of the phasing for the development. And lastly, there are a couple of cases taken from the media, which I believe I spoke about in the presentation itself. So that is the presentation, and I am open for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, do you have any questions for the applicant regarding his presentation?
Yeah, so would you agree that this subject's location is superior to all the comparables?
It's more centrally located. I think once all the issues of the site have been kind of addressed, and that is what we are speaking about, is addressing all of these issues. At this point, they haven't been addressed. So once those issues have been addressed, I would agree that this is a good location.
And you would agree, like, the proximity to obtaining services would be closer than, say, obtaining services in land located more on the outside of the city?
So it's easier for those areas nearing the outside of the city because, again, it follows a natural path of development. and the services eventually just reach there. So I kind of disagree with you on this, because one thing that I outlined specifically in the presentation was that the services currently in place do not meet the standard for this size of development. So the specific portions that I spoke about regarding the Doncaster is that the overflow and the size of waste that were planned for that that drainage system were planned probably decades ago, decades and decades ago. So it wasn't envisioning this type of large scale development. So those things have to be addressed still. And one of the specific points that I actually kind of hinted at was that the easiest way to fix this actually would be, and most cost effective way would be, to tie into the expansion of Keniston. And again, that is also up in the air as to when that will happen.
Okay, and going back to the overall like acquisition here of the property, this case was settled back in 2019, where Canada Lands Corporation knew they were getting the 51 acres. Is that correct?
So the court case decided that First Nations would be entitled to a portion of the site, the larger portion of the site, and there would be an excess amount that would be sold off, and Canada Lands Corporation would obviously get that. So it is part of the settlement itself that Canada Lands received that.
Okay. And then since we had discussed what the sale price was, Canada Lands Corporation would have ultimately have known about these type of issues when undertaking a price to pay for this, would they not?
I think that's in my rebuttal. I'm just going to say no. No.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harden, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Okay, I think it partially touched on that, but uh, this is a parcel of land that most developers would be happy to own, would it not?
I think once you have the kinks kind of ironed out of it, I would agree with you. The kinks haven't been ironed out though.
Okay, and there's a lot of pressure nowadays for infill development as opposed to development on the peripheries of the city.
Yeah, I would say that um, I'm not sure I would call this infill development. This is much larger scale than just regular infill development. This is a large subdivision within the city, inside the city proper. I'm not really sure how to term it, whether it's infill. I think infill kind of really isn't a good representation of what it is. I see infill as like, one or two lots in River Heights that, are changed over. But yes, getting back to your original point, how would developers look at this? I think, as I mentioned, once developers would see that all of these kinks have been dealt with, and we have things in place, they would probably jump at it. However, keep in mind the date here. This is 2023. There's no secondary plan in place. There's nothing in place. And there are all of these hurdles to cross. So I think as we move further along in that development horizon, and we start moving forward in time, all of those things kind of happen in order, hopefully without any opposition. Again, that is one of those risks. You don't really see that in those areas that we're talking about, for example, Waverly West, because it's just former farmland. There's no one to oppose development. Here, there's so many other things, so many variables at work here that need to happen before this thing actually gets going. And it's a difficult parcel to develop. That's why it's Canada Lands developing it and not, any other developer. I think when those developers would jump on to this is when all of these things have been addressed, and we are finally looking at, rezoning actually happening. I think at that point, yes, I would agree with you, but until then, and at that time, back in 2023, I don't think there's any way that we can suggest that it would be very similar to those other areas or more desirable. No, there's a lot of hurdles for this
Okay.
development.
And you suggested there's no economic benefit to the open areas, but don't most residential areas require green space?
Yes, parkland dedication, green space is always required in most subdivisions. And again, because of the scale of this, you're talking about 30% of the site basically being, to that. It's a little larger than what I've seen. So, I mean, that gives you a sense of the scale of this this site in the future. But what I would say is that, yeah, there is no economic benefit coming from those areas. And one thing that I would also try and cement is that the comparisons that the assessor is using don't have that. They're single sites. And I think that's the distinction that has to be drawn when looking at those comparisons versus, what we're looking at here.
Okay, and it's not clear on the development plans where those ponds are purely for aesthetics, or are they retention ponds designed to reduce runoff?
Exactly. Exactly. They're there for a physical reason. So they're there to supplement the planned improvements of the wastewater and drainage in the area. So not only will there be that, but there will also have to be other adjustments made to supplement the land drainage capabilities of this, because the drainage system is decades old and it simply won't be able to manage the outflows of this area. And as I mentioned, the planned expansion of the city on Kenniston is probably the easiest way of fixing this.
Yeah, I believe that development proposal did include separating the combined sewers, if I recall correctly. All right, I have no more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mann, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do have a couple of questions dealing with some of the negatives that you outlined, Mr. Navarro. First of all, with respect to some of the negatives of this property, you talked about the access to services, and I think the Mr. Assessor, dealt with this by indicating that hookups were close, and then you talked about the sewage as well. The hookups are closer, geographically at least, located than the comps, specifically the comp at 180 Creek Bend Road that you dealt with at page 16. Would that be correct?
Yes and no.
Okay. And you did talk about the outgoing.
Would they be adequate, I guess, is the response.
Would they be adequate? Yes, but that wasn't,
Yeah.
the efficacy of the drainage and sewage can all be dealt with at later times as well, but that would be part of the development plan, and I think it is part of the development plan, is it not? Or the development plan as it existed at approval date in March of 2021? Weren't there access?
No.
Okay.
No, there was no actual development plan at that time.
Okay, not the development plan, but
Are you talking about the secondary plan?
no, the primary plan that was approved, because the secondary plan wasn't approved until post-reference.
Yeah.
So the primary plan dealt with it in some perhaps not in the detail that would be required for a development plan, but it was dealt with in an overarching view as part of the plan.
Sure. I mean, and there is a separate wastewater management plan as well.
Right.
And all of those take into consideration the challenges in this area. So, I mean, I see what you're saying. There is a plan in place. The plan had to be put in place. Otherwise, there's no way of moving forward. The problem is what route to take with the challenges of the area. So when I got into the idea of this area not having the adequate capacity to actually adequate capacity to kind of achieve those flows that would be generated from this area, that's not something that is easy to cross, because I mean there are several steps to it that have to be made. And one of the things that they're kind of counting on is, again, we can really lower the costs of this subdivision going forward if we can tie into Keniston. And again, that's just a question mark.
And the question that we're going to have to determine as the panel, with your assistance and with the assistance of the assessor, is what amount of discount on the land is, on the valuation of the land, is necessary to accurately reflect these ongoing or upcoming issues. And you have assigned a value of it, and I'm just trying to do a comparison with the 180 Creek Bend Road, which requires some hookup as well, but access with respect to 180 Creek Bend, the north-south arteries, the east-west arteries, and in this I'm referring to Taylor and Grant running east-west and Keniston running north-south, place it in a superior, I guess, road access location than the 180 Creek Bend Road. Would you agree with that?
What page are you in? Like what?
Well, it's a combination of pages. It's the plan, first of all, that shows Taylor and Keniston and Grant from the map at page 13, and then the Creek Bend Road. I'm just asking you to compare the access, the east, west, north, south access roads around that area. They aren't as effective and not as built up, certainly, as the Keniston area. Is that fair to say?
Just give me a second while I turn to the Creek Bend areas. Apologize for that.
That's okay.
Okay, so Creek Bend is in the Saint Vital area. That's precinct K.
Right.
Yeah. So that is just on the cusp of that section of Saint Vital, which is on the corner of Lagimodier and I can't even pronounce it. It's the former Bishop Grant.
Vinoji Mikaju?
Yeah. I'm not even going to try. Yeah. So those areas that are south of that, then there is raw farmland. So actually, we're fairly close to the development areas here, but you're right. I mean, new services have to be put in. But I hope you've, in the presentation, I hope you appreciate that I wasn't only centering on wastewater and all of that.
No, I recognize that you raised a number of issues, all of which need to be addressed.
Exactly. Size of the comparison is a huge one as well. But I would agree with you.
There are also advantages to having parcels this large, are there not? Especially, well, I'm going to say especially with a developer such as Canada Lands that has some experience nationally in this kind of development.
Yeah, I think had it been any other, I'm not sure that the vision would be going forward as well. However, that said, we're trying to address the issues that were in place as of the reference date.
Yes.
So,
of course.
Yeah. So down the road, as I mentioned to Mr. Harden, I think once all of these hurdles have been crossed, I'm not sure that those other comparisons have those issues. And that's where I think this one is highly different. Once those issues have been addressed, I mean, I'll agree with the assessor, I'll agree with everyone. The developers will jump on board with this once all of those things have been kind of addressed.
Okay, the current zoning though it's consistent with a holding pattern for federal properties. In this case, it was the Department of National Defense, the RR5.
Yeah.
Okay. And just a couple more with respect to looking at the comparables and the charts that you've provided overall. Would you agree with the concept of anticipatory pricing, or a concept that the land sales, vacant land sales, are purchased in anticipation of redevelopment, and there are always going to be certain barriers to that, but there is an aspect of the anticipatory pricing that can be built into the price?
Yes. So actually, I actually took that into account in determining the price. So if you see the evolution of the price as we go into 2025, you'll see that upward trend as we start moving along that development horizon.
I
So
wasn't going to go into your next brief. I have reviewed it. For this particular reference date, though, there has to be an aspect of anticipatory pricing as to what might go on. It's a risk reward for any developer who's going to buy it.
Sure. And if we were at that risk reward stage where developers were looking at buying, I would agree with you. We're not there at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I've got anything further right now, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Navarro.
Thank you.
All right, let me just review my notes for 1 minute because sorry, I just want to make sure, but I believe all of my questions have already been answered by the panel questioning. So we can now move on to the applicant's.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we just have the matter of the class and liability as well.
Yes. Shall we deal with that now and then get into rebuttal?
Yeah, if the applicant can just confirm what he would like done about those.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like for the classification liability to be confirmed.
Okay, sorry, I'm just noting this. Okay, Ms. Picotto, you noted the same?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so we do have rebuttal evidence from the applicant. Before we proceed with that, does anybody need a quick break right now, or should we wait until?
I have to go use the washroom, so if we could step for a few minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
So let's just take a very brief recess so everyone can do what they need to do. And then I'll see everyone in a couple minutes. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Applicant. I believe you have rebuttal evidence, so please proceed when you are ready.
Correct. So on page 2 of the rebuttal, you can see that I am looking at 425 Ballant Street Drive. The picture below that is showing bylaw number 14, 2015. That bylaw changed the zoning at that time to residential mixed use for the areas that we're looking at specifically. I think I've marked it there with a red X. So comparison number 1 noted on the map below took almost 10 years to begin development, suggesting a different development horizon. Site servicing was in place all at the time, so the assessor's information is actually not correct. You can see the overhead picture there taken in May 2021. I believe that sale occurred in the assessor's brief in February 2021. So this is a few months after. You can see that the roadway is in. On the roadway, if you look close enough, you can see light posts. I'll tell you right off the bat that I've handled most of the appeals in this subdivision over the past few cycles. So I know that this eastern part of the subdivision was one of the first areas to actually be fully serviced and hooked up and ready for development. So I don't know where the assessor's information is coming from, but I know that area to have been serviced at that time. On page 4, you can see 165 Sage Creek. And again, on June 26, 2020, DAZ 2020 was already in place, changing the existing zoning to RR5, from RR5 to RMFM. So that is, the sale took place on January 28th, 2021. So that is sometime afterward. And you can also see that this is a 2018 pick that was taken. So this is sometime before the development actually took place. And as you can see, the roadways are in, all of those lights are in. Typically, services are put in before the roadways, not after. So that's how we know that the services are in at that time, and that all we need here is just the site hookups. And you can see on page 5 again, highlighted at the bottom in the yellow, June 26, 2020, council approved subdivision and rezoning application DASZ 2-2020, which involved subdivision of 8.279 acres on the northeast corner of Sage Creek Boulevard and Boulevard des Yvernant into 3 lots and rezoning them from RR5 to residential multifamily medium. On page 6, 525 Ballantree, same thing as number 1. Again, the bylaw was in place already. Zoning had changed. Services were in. Site is also 31 times smaller than the subject. Not really comparable. And then page 7, we have comparison number 4, which is 400 Pipeline Road, sold in October 2017. In July of 2018, rezoning had taken place. Very short development horizon. Site servicing, the assessor's information that says that site servicing was not in. However, you can see a picture above taken in May of 2009, and you can see the ditches on Pipeline Road. I know this area very well. And then in June of 2012, the picture there notes the new streets are put in. This is the same site. You can see the entranceway into this site, and the services are in. On page 9, 27 King Edward, that should say King Edward, not Pipeline. Sold in February of 2019, DASZ 2017-2018, rezoning was approved in 2020. Site is 8.5 times smaller than the subject, making the comparison again. This is single site. It's for the future school development. So there is a high school that I believe is supposed to go in here. And lastly, there is comparison number 6, which is 80 Payworks. So comparison number 6 in the assessor's comparison says that this was agricultural. However, you can see there in the commentary from the City of Winnipeg website of Councillor Janice Lukes, says some exciting news for South Point, Prairie Point, and our surrounding neighborhoods. Many key residents are familiar with a large field on the northeast corner of Waverly Street and Kenniston Boulevard. This parcel is zone C3, which means commercial corridor C3. So it says there on December 2nd, the Assiniboia Community Committee approved this, and it created a C3 zone there. So that was approved, as it says there in December of 2019. And the property sold in October of 2020. So this change had already taken place when the property sold. And the very last set of information is regarding the subject sale. So I've included the title. You can see that the sale price matches the assessment. So while the assessor hasn't disclosed the sale, he also hasn't. I mean, he's also. I think we're clear that the assessment is the sale price. And so, what's wrong with the sale? Well, let's talk about it. What is the Canada Lands Corporation? It's an agent of Her Majesty the Queen, and I'll refer to this as Her Majesty the Queen because at the time it was still under Her Majesty the Queen.
Sorry, was the sale not post-reference?
The sale was post-reference,
Yes.
but the assessment is the sale.
Right, but we can't look at post-reference.
Okay. Okay. So we'll ignore the sale then. But we will talk about the transaction about Canada Lands. Okay. So unless you would want me to talk about this for the following appeal, when it is actually
The following one, it will not be post-reference, so you can
exactly
absolutely deal with it.
Okay.
And when we get to number 2 on the docket.
Okay. However, I will mention some things about Canada Lands Corporation.
Sure.
So it is a crown corporation, and its only shareholder is Her Majesty the Queen. So I will leave it at that, and I will speak about the sale on the following property. Okay, so that's it.
Oh, thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, do you have any questions for the applicant regarding his rebuttal evidence? You're on mute, Mr. Assessor.
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harden, do you have any questions for the applicant regarding his rebuttal evidence?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mann?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, nor do I. So, Mr. Assessor, do you have any rebuttal evidence?
I do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a need for a summary from either party?
I don't think, I mean, I could just speak to summation at the end of the whole presentation from the next one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Navarro?
I'm good with that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We can move on to the next matter on the docket then, which will be number 2, which is, sorry, let me just, it's a file number 24-4482. So, Mr. Assessor, please proceed when you are ready.
Okay, so roll number 1209-780-9485, owned by Canada Lands Corporation, the same property that was just discussed here. We have an assessed value for 2025 at 13,151,000. We know the land is vacant residential 2. We know the land area 2,229,056. That did sell for 11,328,000, as you can see, July 21st, 2022. I had put in the information here regarding Canada Lands Corporation, which I think we've already discussed at length between myself and the applicant, providing who they are, etc. Now, I guess the important thing would be just looking at the comparables here. So on page 6, we did provide some comparables. Now, there were some other ones I was able to bring forward. So on this table, the subjects on the right-hand side here, comparables 1, 2, and 3 would all be zoned agricultural and rural residential 5. You can see the sizes range from 5 acres to 10.045 acres. And then the sale prices per square foot ranging from $4.12 per square foot to $8.44 per square foot. And where the subject is at, we're at $5.90 per square foot. So we do feel again like we're reflecting a little bit more on the lower end, and then also given location, being that this is a premium location located where it is, I think that $5.90 is reasonable there. I did provide a couple additional comparables that they were from the other presentation, just because I had felt that it still gave a little bit more background with the agricultural type zoning that was in place. So yeah, and so those ones again were the 2 comps from the last one, and you could see the price per acre, 195, 116, 825, 419. Again, fits in with the subject property there. So just the rundown of the comps. So comp 1 again was on Inkster Boulevard, 2125 Inkster Boulevard, and Inkster North Industrial, zoned vacant or zoned agricultural. You can see the size of it and where it's located near the development was somewhat close to comp number 5. They're in close proximity with each other. So again, $7.08 per square foot, or 5.90 per square foot here. And this was 10 acres. And comp number 2, we have $8.44 per square foot. And this was 5 acres in Waverly West B. And there's also zoned agricultural down in unimproved street. And you could see that $8.44 per square foot was paid there. Obviously, it is smaller. And again, I would also reflect, we are at $5.90. We are at almost 30-40% less per square foot. And I would say a better location. Comp number 3, you could see that is located in Creek Bend Road in Freypont, rural residential 5. And you could see there $4.12 per square foot. So this would be on the lower end. Once again, more superior location, given the nature of where the location on Keniston is compared to out here. And comp 4 would be another one in the, I guess was it Bridge? That one was Prairie Point, I guess, but it's in that Bridgewater, South Point area. That one was already zoned residential multifamily and sold for $17 per square foot. Now, again, I provide that just to show sort of the contrast of where it is once the zoning and that has been in place, how much the value can change. Now, we are at $5.90 per square foot. So we're at we're at a more than reasonable standpoint given the nature of the proposed development of this subject. And comp 5 and 6 we already touched on from the previous presentation. I just added it as additional information to just show I know there's limited availability sometimes of the agricultural rural residential 5 comparables. that could be maybe closer to the city, so. Other than that, I think we've touched on the zoning already. I don't need to go into that once again, and that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Applicant, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Just that the comparisons that you're using again are significantly smaller than the subject, correct?
That is correct.
And generally speaking, they are single sites, correct?
Yes, they would be single sites. Mhm.
Okay. And in terms of your comparable number 3 on Creek Bend,
Mhm.
that is next to that subdivision that we were talking about on the corner of the let's see, let's call it the former Bishop Grandin area and Lajimori Boulevard, correct? I believe it's called Island Lakes, right?
Yeah, this is Frey Pond.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's by if you see the perimeter highways running to is kind of at the southeast corner there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's actually very close to the subdivision, like Island Lakes. It's like right beside it. I believe those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harden, do you have any questions?
Okay, your comp 1, that's an industrial area. It's going to be used for industrial purposes.
We have vacant agricultural land, like that's the puck on it right now. I don't know what the future use is.
Okay. That land had undergone years of pre-consolidation, though. There was used um, dumping a lot of earth into that land to pre-consolidate it. Would that affect the value?
I honestly, I wouldn't even be able to answer that question.
Okay, I know that because it was on my way to the golf club, and years they were dumping land on that soil, dumping soil on that land rather. Okay, no other questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mann, do you have any questions?
Yes, I'm not sure that you can answer this, but it appears, Mr. Michalak, that at $5.90 a square foot, a discount to what otherwise might be the rate or the square footage rate has been applied. What does the model take? And that's a modeled amount, $5.90. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And when I say $5.90, I mean $5.90 per square foot. What factors with respect to vacant land, and if you can't tell me what factors the algorithm takes into account, what factors are input into the process to get the value out? Or do you input any specific values or land characteristics in order to get the assessed value?
I don't really work in that area that would input that number. I mean, I get a value and I look at it and say, okay, where does this fall in line reasonably with other comparables? I don't really know exactly what figures would be applied that way to get that number.
Okay, fair enough. Another question, it's along the same lines, but maybe there are other factors that you can advise the panel. I see that there's a 16% appreciation with respect to the assessed value. The land itself hasn't changed. What has changed that would allow for or indicate a 16% appreciation, or is that just simply a market appreciation based on the land values of the time?
Yeah, so it would just be again the looking at that appreciation and then running it against other comparable properties. that we would see fit to make sure that it falls in line on a reasonable basis.
Okay, so the appreciation is model driven as well then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. The questions I had with that answers that I got with respect to the last one, I'll assume are asked and answered again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no questions at this point. So, Mr. Applicant, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay. Just, Madam Chair, on the topic of the sale, when would you like me to address the issue of the sale, which is pertinent at this point?
I guess, oh, sorry. Before we move on to that, though, can you please address the issues of liability, taxation, classification of property?
Okay, we asked
Get that
that
out
the
of the way.
board confirm classification and liability.
Okay, Ms. Picoto, you got that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess as for the sale, I guess you can just roll it into your presentation.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll actually start with the information on the sale. So the property sold in 2022. I'm just going to quickly glance at the assessor's brief because I actually think he included the sale date here. Yes. So this would be July 21st, 2022 for $11,328,000, which also happens to be the 2023 assessed value. However, let's talk about the land sale. First point on page 17 of the original rebuttal that I used for the 2023 submission is Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Canada sold the subject property to Canada Lands Company CLC Limited, of whom Her Majesty the Queen is the sole shareholder of this company. The subject property was not exposed to the market, offered for sale in any shape or form. No declaration of market value was made, nor was an appraisal conducted to determine the market value of the subject. The property sale price was determined by a comprehensive agreement between the Department of National Defence and Canada Lands Company. CLC was legally obliged to buy the land from the Department of National Defence. The price, in fact, was dictated to CLC. The payment was made on a promissory note of $5 million. The remainder was paid over a period. The price included obligations to reimburse costs to the Department of National Defence. The price may be linked to a negotiated value that was included or accounted for Treaty 1 First Nations lands as well, proportionate to CLC's portion. And the post-reference date information is not pertinent to this one. But those are the issues relating to the sale of the property. We contend that this market transaction was not a market transaction. I won't even call it a market transaction anymore. It was an exchange between one side of Her Majesty the Queen to another side of Her Majesty the Queen. And the terms of the price to be paid were essentially dictated to Canada Lands Corporation. So I'll start now with my presentation, and if I may, Madam Chair, a lot of the information in this brief is exactly the same as was in the previous one. So I don't think I need to go over that. I believe it took me almost an hour to go over it, so I don't think we need to do that again. I will simply flip to the sections on sales, starting on page 31 and 33. You can see that we use some of the same sales that we used in the previous presentation. On page 35, there is a separate grouping of sales that we took from assessor briefs, and these were for vacant lands. We don't think that there's too much really to derive from these lands. I think there's probably newer lands that probably describe, although these comparisons on page 35 and 36 were actually being used this cycle, not in the previous cycle. And in terms of the sales that we did look at to determine the sale price, those are on page 37. So we have a set of comparisons there. We have a couple of RR5 sales, and the majority are agricultural. So on page 38, I make the notes about the land drainage, all of that, and that I included in the previous presentation. We chose a value exceeding at 200,000. And again, the market value of the upper end and lower end of our sales is between 14,400 and 161,000 per acre. We could take that all the way up to 365,000 per acre, as we did in the previous example. However, we think that there would have been some appreciation from the previous cycle, hence the reason that we've applied a rate of $200,000 per acre, or $459 per square foot. 10,290,000. What needs to be clear about this is that in no way are we using the sale price as our reference point as to how we're increasing the value of this property. We are ignoring the sale simply because we don't believe it's an actual market transaction. So our starting point would have been different than the assessor's starting point, taking into consideration all of the points that we've made in this presentation and the previous presentation for the 2023 base year. So we are looking at 10,290,000. In the appendix, we have some of the same information included in the previous one. So I am open for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just regarding the sale, are you aware how the federal government goes about dictating the sales of these lands?
So there is typically a declaration of surplus land to begin with. That is the first phase of the process. What happened in this case is that the federal government went directly to Canada Lands and said, you're buying this land. First Nations opposed this, and we went through the whole court process on that. After that, there was a comprehensive agreement between all parties. The terms of the sale itself, in terms of saying the terms, the sale price was dictated to Canada Lands Corporation. So yes, they're saying you're going to be paying this amount for this land. So there is no sale transaction as we would view it in the appraisal or the assessment field, where you're looking at those typical signs of a sale. Was it exposed to market? Was it marketed? Was there a willing buyer and a willing seller? Those are not present in this type of transaction. How the price was established, at this point, we don't have a clear idea of it. And we interviewed Canada Lands Corporation on this topic. So it's not like we were just pulling this out of a hat here. They're telling us that essentially these terms are being dictated to them. The sale price may have been a proportionate share of the overall value of the entirety of the subdivision, including First Nations lands, and then noting that they would have just paid the proportionate share. That wouldn't have taken into account the fact that the lands along Kenniston are likely more valuable simply because they have there's more space, there's more density in them, and the uses are higher and better. So, but that's from our point, we haven't been able to confirm that. So, how they came up with the price, I don't know. But what we do know is that it wasn't a market transaction. I hope that answers your question.
No, to an extent, no, you know what? Those are all my questions. I mean, I had asked previously already, from the prior presentation, so, I don't have any new ones.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Harden, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Okay, you've got, oh, didn't work out the percentage, but it looks like over 50% increase in the value this time.
Yeah, so as a starting point, I'm looking at the previous example that we had, so for 2023, and I'm applying some type of percentage increase on that. Now, it is a high increase, but then we are further along that development horizon. So that's why I feel at this point it's appropriate to increase the price per acre to something closer to 200,000.
Okay, all right. I got no further questions then.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mann, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do. Just following up on Mr. Harden's question, the appreciation amount to which he referred, and you answered what had gone into it, but how do you determine the amount? Instead of it going up 60% or 40%, you chose the amount to bring it to $10,290,000. Is there a mathematical construct? I doubt it.
Yeah, so
how did you determine that?
Yeah, I'm taking into account where we are on the development horizon, and also price increases from last cycle to this cycle. So if we would have observed 15 to 20% increases, that would have been taken into account. But the fact that we're just that much further along on the development horizon, we felt that we needed to adjust the price upward a little bit more at this time frame. Again, acknowledging that we are looking at April 1, 2023 at this point.
Right.
Where the concept plan is fully in place. No development applications have been made, so no rezoning yet, but we're still a little bit further along. Those things that haven't been addressed are still the wastewater and drainage. All of those have not been determined. There's no finality to that. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
Well, it does and it doesn't. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there is no numerical construct that'll say at this stage of the development process, you increase the value by 50%. At this stage, you increase it by 60%. It's more of an art than science at this point. And would that be fair to say?
I would say that applies to most land valuation, is that it's more an art than a science.
Yeah. Okay, good. Then that will take care of my next couple of questions anyway. So thank you. The parties to the negotiation, because you indicated in your rebuttal that the price may be linked to a negotiated value that included or accounted for Treaty 1 First Nations. During that negotiation, the parties at the table would have been council representatives from Department of National Defence, council or representatives of Canada Lands, and individual council and or representatives from 7 individual Treaty 1 bands. That be fair to say?
Correct.
Okay, so you've got probably 9 different council or representatives at the table, all of whom, some of whom are certainly adverse in interest. Some are trying to get the best possible price and some low, and some are trying to get the best possible price high.
Mm-hmm.
That negotiation, presumably, or would you agree that that negotiation would lead to a price that was at least acceptable by all parties, much like a private transaction?
It was an exchange. It was an agreed to value. I don't, just to point out, I think when we're looking at what we call a bona fide sale market transaction, which we look at for use in evidence, we want certain things to be met. This one doesn't meet many of them, and that's why we call it a non-market transaction. But to get to your point of, was this a negotiated value, and were they looking for the best negotiated value? Probably the lowest value that they could get for this land, right?
Right.
Nobody's going to pay more for it. So our information that we got from the client, from the ownership, is that this may have been a proportionate amount of the overall value that was negotiated for the entirety of the site. That would include the First Nations land. So if you take out the Canada lands portion, you're left with about 51 acres, okay? And the remainder goes to First Nations. That does not take into account the differences in the land. So about what I mean by proportionate shares, they simply said, okay, you're paying this amount for the remaining 51 acres. What that doesn't really disclose is that you would naturally pay more for the stuff that goes on to Kenaston. And that is clear. So the inward stuff that is located in between Tuxedo and Kenaston, you would likely pay less for, simply because the uses are not as high. And you're going to achieve less density from them. So the valuable stuff is the stuff that went to First Nations. So if we're looking at the price, this is what we paid overall for it. Canada Lands takes this proportionate share. It doesn't really address the fact that they probably, everybody probably wanted the stuff that rented Kenaston, not Canada Lands portion.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further.
Sorry, I'm just making a note. Okay, and I do not have any questions for the applicant. So would either party like to summarize?
Yeah, no, so I'll just kind of give a brief summarization. I think we provided evidence just to show that on a valuation standpoint, that we are on the lower end of the spectrum in regards to a property that is quite unique and one of a kind within the city of Winnipeg, where you're going to have a superior location like this. And given the size of the parcel, I think we've done at least a competent job at valuing it towards the lower end, to give the benefit of the doubt of just the sheer size and uniqueness of the parcel. And so that would be all I have for summation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Applicant.
I think we've demonstrated that in terms of our approach. We've tried to summarize the issues with this parcel of land, what the deterrence would be for any potential purchaser, and why nobody has purchased any land at this point. Secondly, we tried to frame an argument on, sorry, is everyone still there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so
You lose us?
yes, I lost you there for a second. Second is that we tried to frame some type of argument on how we come up with a value for this property. It is difficult considering all of the issues that we've outlined. However, we also noted in our rebuttal and our questioning that none of the assessor's evidence actually backs up their value for either cycle. The comparisons that were used all had rezoning at the time, or were close to rezoning, or they had services in place. And the most important thing is that there's no relevance in terms of size between a single site and a large subdivision like this. There is going to be some economies of scale here. So I don't think that's where the assessor has made a good stand on in terms of the starting point of the value for this property. And I think we have something that is more plausible given all of the limitations of this site at this time and frame, time in terms of the first cycle and in terms of the second cycle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. Hope everybody has a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.